I believe God exists, not because I can prove God. I can't prove God. Just the same way you can't prove to me your mom is not going to drop arsenic in your tea when you go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. But the evidence, as you pointed out, is my mom doesn't drop poison in my food. That's why I don't bring my chemistry kit to the breakfast table. Evidence. Similarly, the evidence is that God exists. The first piece of evidence is order and design. Points to a designer. Second piece of evidence. The Big Bang shows us that the universe is not eternal. There is a beginning.
Secular villages that have raised themselves to value human life, they've been completely cut off from all civilization, and they've had no need for a god, and they're not killing each other.
That's
they
correct.
live in social harmony.
And all of my atheist friends live very altruistic lives. But you see, you missed my point. My point is not that an atheist murders people. That's not my point.
Your point is that the atheist that has no morality because it doesn't have your Christ has no problem with murdering people because they have no establishment for their morality.
Pretty close, but not quite.
So why aren't I killing everyone?
Because you have a conscience, and your conscience informs you that murdering people is absolutely wrong, but you've got a real intellectual problem. Because if in your head you say morality is relative and there is no God, so the individual defines morality, but it's absolutely wrong, it's objectively wrong to murder people, you've got intellectual hypocrisy.
Society defines morality.
Fine. Which society? Nazi? South African? Dred Scott decision? America at the time of the Dred Scott decision? You still have cultural relativism, sir, if you say that society defines right and wrong.
The greater... All right, fine. Yeah, just keep on going with this. Can I ask some other questions since you're...
Sure.
All right. Can you explain the rising of separate religions in different parts of the world, all completely unrelated, not feeding off each other in any way? And can you also explain the characteristics of Jesus Christ that were conveniently borrowed from religions that established it thousands of years before that myth even existed?
Well, anthropology shows us that every culture around the world has some type of religion.
Yes, and that is to explain things that they can't explain because of their lack of knowledge.
Really?
Yes.
Why don't you explain to me what is the basis of your worth as a human being? What is the purpose of your life? How do you make ethical decisions? And do you think there's life after death or not? I'm listening.
Okay. No, I do not think there's life after death. The reason for living is to procreate just like any other mammal.
Uh-huh.
I live my life ethically because of the societal structure around me. There is technically no basis of human worth. We define our own human worth through our society.
Good. So if I define this man as being inferior to me because he's of a different ethnic heritage, what do you have to say to me?
I would say that on a genetic basis, he is worth no more or less than you.
But what if my culture says that because of my ethnic heritage, I am more valuable than he is? What do you say to me?
I would say that your ethnic heritage is probably bigoted.
Bigoted? Where on earth do you, as a moral relativist, get off calling my culture bigoted?
Because you are making an assertion based purely on a belief that has no evidence in order to persecute someone else.
Sir, based on what you say and your worldview, all morality is relative, culturally relative. You've said it flat out. So if my culture tells me that I am more valuable than him because of my ethnic heritage, where do you get off judging my culture?
Your culture is wrong because it demeans another culture with no evidence to back that belief.
Sir, if my culture teaches me something...
My God with no evidence tells me that these people are inferior, so they're inferior, because you're basing that off of something with no evidence.
You better work harder because you're cutting the ground out from underneath your feet real fast, sir. If what you say at the beginning is true, that morality is relative, culturally relative, then what is the basis of you telling me that my culture, which tells me that I am superior to this man, is wrong? If culture is the basis of defining right and wrong, where do you get off telling me that my culture's wrong and that your culture's right? Aren't you an elitist American?
Societal norms that have been crafted through years and years and years of human progress.
Oh, great. Years and years of human progress. Why don't you face the fact that in this country there are far more murders today than there were 75 years ago?
There's also far more people.
Far more murders. So if there's
population
all
has-
this progress in our special culture, why are there so many more murders in America today than there were 75 years ago?
The world grew by like 1 billion.
We're not talking about the world, we're talking about the United States.
Which isn't a continent. we're a huge part of the North American continent. We grew by millions.
Sir, if you believe that morality is relative, live it out. Come on, live it out. And don't give me this hogwash that if I have a racist attitude towards him, that I'm absolutely wrong. No, you believe morality is relative. So if I want to have a racist attitude towards this gentleman,
You should
live
have
and
some
let
evidence
live.
to back it up.
Live. And my culture taught me to be racist. And you just said the basis of morality is culture. So live it out. If that's what you believe, live it out. The same way that you know if I say I believe in Jesus Christ, and I go up to this man and say I hate your guts, I'm a hypocrite. If I say I believe in Jesus and I hate you, that's hypocrisy. In the same way, if you tell me that morality is culturally relative, and then you tell me that my culture, which teaches me that she's inferior to me because she's a woman and I'm a man, that I'm wrong, you're an intellectual hypocrite. It's that simple. You're contradicting yourself. Does that make any sense to you?
I think what you're doing is you're taking my argument, which is that the base structure of morality has been determined by cultures over thousands and thousands of years, and you are turning it into a justification for your insane fringe beliefs.
I'm willing to face the logical consequences of my belief in Jesus Christ. The logical consequences to my belief in Jesus Christ is that if this guy tries to cut me off at the knees, I am to forgive him and to love him. And if I hate him, I'm a hypocrite. But you, sir, are not willing to live out the consequences of your belief, which is, it's all culturally relative, which means if I say that my culture teaches me that black people or Hispanic people are inferior to white people, that that's good, you're not willing to say, yeah, that's good, Cliff, because it's all culturally determined. So you've got a major contradiction going on between your head, your intellect, and the way you live your life. And that's scary if you claim to be a thinking person.
Right.
Just read Nietzsche, Camus, Sartre. They pointed out beautifully. If there is no God, morality is not objective. Morality is defined either by the individual or culture or the power elite, which means it's all relative, depending upon which culture you're in, which individual you're talking to, or whether you're talking to Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or Winston Churchill or Teddy Roosevelt.
Culture isn't just defined by a single isolated culture.
All right? How do you define
You're
it?
able to isolate, you're able to have these fringe beliefs. It's the same with the far-right Christianity, it's the same with Hitler, it's the same with the personality cult in North Korea. When you can eschew the opinions of the greater world, you can take any belief that you want, regardless of how insane and bigoted it is. When you have to deal with thousands of years of history, the many, many successful city-states, countries, continents in the past, all taking what they have learned and putting it forward in a progressive way, you start losing the ability to persecute people for your fringe beliefs, because other people can use the societal norms before them and their ability to think to realize that perhaps equality is a good thing. All right? And that doesn't mean that morality is absolute.
All right. I'll give you one more illustration to try and make my point, and if I can't make my point with you, then we're going to have to go on, okay? Because 1945 to 1949, the Nuremberg Trials. 24 Nazi officers were being tried at one point. Their lawyer was brilliant. Their lawyer stood up, looked the panel of judges in the face and said, "These Nazi officers that I'm defending grew up in Germany. They were simply carrying out orders when they gassed the Jews. Where do you allies get off thinking that you can come from the United States, from England, and judge these Nazis from your different cultural perspective?" Sir, the Nuremberg Trials shut down until Robert Jackson, the American consul, stood up and said, there is a law above the law of a country. And according to that law, which is above the law of a country, gassing Jews is wrong. The Nuremberg Trials kicked back into gear, and justice was wreaked on those 24 Nazi soldiers, officers.
just because the law is greater than their individual law within Germany doesn't mean that it's God's law. It's just a greater set, a superior set of laws also set by man.
But if it's set by man, then it is relative, depending upon which man you're talking to.
Okay.
Which means there is no real law above the Nazi law, because Nazis were men who defined their law a certain way, and their law included gassing Jews in Dachau and Auschwitz.
Well, maybe you should realize, this is probably a negative viewpoint for you, that in the end, a majority does in fact make the societal structure. It does follow the societal structure.
Bravo.
Okay.
Good.
But that isn't absolute. The majority can shift, and it has many times.
That's right. Because all you got to do is ask yourself, and what would be true if the Nazis had won World War II? Does that mean they're right, just because the majority wins?
No, but that's where individual thinking, and you didn't listen if you didn't hear the part of what I said. It's a combination of societal norms and the ability to introspect, to think for yourself.
Yes?
You lack that because you're subservient to your religion.
Absolutely not. I think very clearly through ethics.
Yeah,
and I think clearly enough to realize that if there is no God, there is no moral lawgiver. If there is no God, we create morality, and the white South African creates his morality, and I'm not right and he's not wrong. If I think I'm right and the white South African is wrong, I'm an arrogant twit. If morality is relative, I am not right and the KKK is not wrong. Because if morality is relative, the KKK defines right and wrong for himself or herself, and I define right and wrong for myself. Because according to what you say is real and true, morality is relative.
I think what you've done is manage to take this conversation to a different field.
No, I've been banging away on the same point now for over 5 minutes. Well, and you know it.
Essentially, you're asserting that you have a moral absolute based on zero evidence. And that's basically what you're going on.
No, I'm not. I haven't even gotten there.
You cannot prove your Christ exists.
And
if your God does not exist and your Christ does not exist, and the people that wrote that book were all men, subject to the weakness of men, the will of men, the corruption of men, then maybe your entire book is corrupt.
Good.
Which means that your entire belief system is corrupt, which means you are living in your own moral ambiguity every day through the reflections of your dogma.
I love you, buddy. It got real hot in the kitchen, so you hopped right out of the kitchen and you transferred the discussion from moral relativism versus objective morality. Fine, we can go there, but I can promise you, sir, that's not what we were discussing. We were talking about objective morality versus relative morality. Now, if you want to go on to evidence for existence of God, we can do that.
One doesn't matter without the other, because if you cannot prove that your God exists, that means you cannot prove that there is an absolute morality. And if there is no absolute morality, the whole point of that first argument is completely moot, because we don't have a choice in the matter. It just goes the way it goes.
Then let me tell you why I believe God exists. First, I believe God exists because order and design point to a designer. A wristwatch points to a watchmaker.
Really?
Why do I believe you have a brain? Have I ever seen your brain? Smelled your brain? Touched your brain?
You
No.
can see my brain through a CT scan.
I've not seen your brain today. Why am I convinced that between your two handsome ears there's a brain? Because of the way you articulate. Because of the way you've dressed yourself in an orderly fashion.
That's interesting. You're using evidence for this argument.
That's very good. That's exactly right. Evidence.
I mean, it's evidence based nowhere in fact, but you're trying to use evidence to try to turn this into a logical argument on your side, when in the end, you cannot justify an all-powerful being.
Sir,
it's just that easy.
You asked me a very thoughtful question, and that question is, why do you believe God exists? I'm answering your question. I believe God exists, not because I can prove God. I can't prove God. Just the same way you can't prove to me your mom is not going to drop arsenic in your tea when you go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. But the evidence, as you pointed out, is my mom doesn't drop poison in my food. That's why I don't bring my chemistry kit to the breakfast table. Evidence. Similarly, the evidence is that God exists. The first piece of evidence is order and design. Points to a designer. Second piece of evidence. The Big Bang shows us that the universe is not eternal. There is a beginning. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause.
So then God was created because everything has to have a beginning.
I didn't say everything has a beginning.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I said everything that, let me say it again then for you. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. Everything that has a beginning has a cause.
Characteristics, right?
Pardon?
God has characteristics. He's all powerful, all knowing. So if he has characteristics, then he must have had a designer. Who created God?
Nobody. God is eternal.
Right, but he has characteristics, so he needed to be created.
No, he did not need to be created.
That is your argument.
No, it is not. My argument was, you gotta start listening better. You're smarter than that. Now, come on. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. That's all I'm saying. So please let's not twist it.
You were making the watchmaker argument.
Yeah, that was design.
Design.
All
right?
Right.
You're saying that if something has characteristics, that it has to have a creator.
That's not what I said. I said the evidence of a watch is that there's a watchmaker, a mind behind it. This watch is not eternal. This watch has a beginning, and the order and design that exist in this watch point me to a watchmaker.
So we can take the Bible's teachings and God's teachings and just omit the word God and just use it as a teaching, a little ethics teaching.
Yeah.
Why does that have to be, why do we have to define it over someone's teaching? Why can't it just be a universal teaching?
Because when it comes to right and wrong, you have to ground right and wrong in reality. And if in reality there is no God, then in reality there's no objective right and wrong. We just create right and wrong as human beings. Maybe to live together, maybe because it helps our evolutionary cycle, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to argue against having a religion, just having the teachings of the religion. Like, let's say we take the story you were talking about with Job, in the book of Job,
yes,
and how could so much bad happen to one person and everything.
Right.
Why can't it just be an ethical teaching that, bad things happen to you and that you should appreciate the things that you do have?
You bet.
So why does it have to, why do we have to include,
you bet,
the God in the Bible?
All right. Sir, my point is this. If there is no God or gods,
okay,
there is no other option then morality is relative. Why? Because in order to have right and wrong, you got to have a rational mind. Inanimate matter does not distinguish between this is right and this is wrong. You have to have a rational mind. So, if there is no rational mind before the human mind, it means obviously the human mind creates right and wrong. Now, not that I'm encouraging you to watch this stuff, but the KKK has put together videos that they use to teach their children the racist, bigoted ways of the KKK. I am convinced that is wrong. Not because I am part of a majority of people in the United States who think that's wrong. See, that's why I respect Dr. Martin Luther King, because he went against the majority, following his conscience instead of following his culture. That's why I respect Sarah and Angelina Grimke, two white women who grew up on a plantation in South Carolina. They left their plantation in South Carolina and joined the abolitionist movement. Why? Because their conscience told them there is a higher law than the law of the state of South Carolina. And according to that law, slavery is wrong.
Okay. My point is, my original point was, why can't we just accept the higher law, but not put a label that it's God's law? Why can't we just accept the idea? Why does there have to be, this is God's law, this is, the Bible's teachings? Why can't we just say this is just the teachings? These are the higher laws.
Okay, it's very simple. You're right, there's a higher law. But you've got to be intellectually consistent, which means if there is no God, there's no higher law. It's a fantasy. And see, what I'm arguing is, no, there is a higher law, and it's not a fantasy. Well, how can it not be a fantasy? Because there is a God who is just and whose character throughout eternity defines justice. And that's why there's a higher law.
I don't feel that I should necessarily have a great reason to reject him. I feel I have no valid reason to accept him or follow any of his teachings.
Good.
When there is other ways to decide what is right and wrong in the world, when there is other ways to look at things.
Very good.
Outside of the Bible.
Absolutely.
And I have studied other religions, and I have studied some philosophies, and a lot of those People say the 10 Commandments are great. Some of those commandments have nothing to do with morality. They have everything to do with insulting a god. And if you're within that thought frame of following that deity, then it makes perfect sense. Yes, don't use the Lord's name in vain. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, don't do things on the Passover. Yes, that makes sense. And I know Jesus took that one back basically later, saying you can save people, whatever. But my point is some of those aren't really moral. Some of those are only moral within the context of the Bible. And outside of it, I don't see the immorality of working on the Passover ever. I don't see the immorality of taking any deity's name in vain, because I don't see any proof of any deity, but that's a whole nother argument.
You bet. Okay, so what is the philosophy that you have embraced, and what's the evidence that that philosophy or that individual is reliable?
As far as an overarching philosophy that would be contained by any one belief system, I don't fully embrace any one belief system. Almost all belief systems have at least minimal issues with them.
Right.
I would say that some of them are better than others, but to take any one wholeheartedly without fully analyzing and looking at the issues behind it is foolish.
Good.
And so I don't subscribe to Buddhism, Hinduism, the Quran. I don't subscribe to Kantian thought or any of those other ones.
Right.
I find things that they have said, things that these great thinkers have thought, and parts of them have different things. I love when Jesus says the golden rule, essentially, do unto others as you would expect them to do unto you. It is beautiful, it is concise, and it is excellent no matter what culture you come from. And I would say I fully embrace that, but Jesus wasn't the only one to say it either.
That's for sure.
So,
good. So what I hear you saying is, I decide what is true, what is false. I have put my faith ultimately in myself. I pick and choose. I go the smorgasbord route, right? I take Jesus, some of his stuff. I take Buddha, some of his stuff. I take the avatars of Hinduism. I take Adam Smith. I take Kant or Nietzsche or Camus or Sartre, whoever. And I pick and choose, and I sort of follow whatever I want to. So I think it's real clear, isn't it, that your faith is ultimately in yourself. You're the arbitrator of truth. Right?
aren't we for all our lives? Doesn't everyone decide what they consider to be true, to be false, to be good? And it's all heavily influenced by the society you grew up in, the religion you grew up in, and it can affect your thought, but that doesn't mean you can't change the way you view the world. And that doesn't mean you can't change the way you see right and wrong, because people do it all the time. If you're in prison for something stupid and you're suffering, you might decide murder is an acceptable option. And honestly, I would say that I wouldn't be one to necessarily say you can't in certain circumstances. And so I believe that on some level, morality isn't always constant as it would have to be for the Bible to hold truth. Because there would have to be ultimately good and ultimately bad. And I don't see ultimately good and ultimately bad in this world.
You and I are very fickle, very inconsistent human beings. You have chosen to put your faith ultimately in yourself, in spite of all the evidence that you are incredibly fickle, incredibly finite, and you at times do what you know is wrong. But you're still choosing to put your faith ultimately in yourself.
I'm willing to understand others.
I am saying it is very wise, based on the evidence of his credibility, his trustworthiness, his lifestyle, his teachings, his death and his resurrection, to put your faith in Jesus Christ. Because the evidence is he's more reliable than I am, and he's more reliable than you are, sir.
But those are just vague concepts that you're taking out of the Bible, which you said earlier to the hymn about his Quran. If it's just from the Quran and you're saying it's just truth, just because it's from the Quran, then that doesn't have much meaning. Well, you're saying, oh, Jesus died. He was nailed to a cross, he suffered, he died, he resurrected. Okay, your Bible says that. Who else says that?
Tons of people.
Who else who was from that time period who could be considered a first-person eyewitness?
Those people betrayed Jesus. Those are the same people who actually snitched on him. Those people were Jewish.
Sir, you have put your faith in yourself. I respect your right to do that. For me to put my faith in myself the way you're putting your faith in yourself would be idiocy. Because the overwhelming evidence is I sin, I do wrong, I experience guilt. I make rational blunders and mistakes. I do the irrational at times. I get sick. I have a date with death. I'm a very finite, weak human being.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ lived a sinless life, the type of life that in my best moments I try to live, but I fail miserably.
Jesus Christ.
He taught amazing ethical teachings.
According to your Bible. According to your
No, according to the
scripture.
historical record. I never once have said the Bible's a word of God. I'm not asking you to accept it as a word of God.
What is the historical record that Jesus lived a sinless life?
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
That is the Bible.
Those are Gospels. Not
Okay,
the Word
those
of
are
God.
Gospels
Historical
contained within the
record.
Bible.
Historical record.
Historical record by the people who believed in it. And it's been generally understood that they actually copied each other. So it could have all come from only one, maybe two sources at best.
No, sir. Totally
I
false.
took a
No
religious
evidence
studies
supports
course.
that.
I studied under a doctorate of religions who discussed with us the origins of those four Gospels. And he said they did copy each other in some cases, whereas there was one that didn't copy the others because it includes certain parts of the story.
So they
But-
all obviously had notes, a Q source. You probably had to study the Q source, right? So they all had notes. Guess what? In light of the fact that they wrote between the mid and end of the first century, 20 to 60 years after Christ, I'm really glad they had notes. Very important to have notes when you're writing an historical document. 20 to 60 years after the fact. Pardon?
Which document was 20 to 60?
All of them. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written in the first century. And probably Mark was written around 55, 60, 65, 70 AD. And then Matthew, Luke, and John were written probably after that. So 20 to 60 years after Jesus, they were written. You see, sir, you've put your faith ultimately in yourself. And yet you're acting like the reason you couldn't put your faith in Christ, the reason you had to walk away from him is because of lack of evidence.
I don't put
Sir,
my
there is
faith in
far less
myself. I put
evidence
my
that
faith
you are
in
reliable
humanity.
than that Jesus is reliable. Far less evidence.
See, you keep saying I put my faith in myself. And yes, to a certain point, but I put my faith in humanity. I put my faith
What does that
in
mean?
people.
What does that
in
mean?
multiple people, multiple minds, all working together. And the same concept is going behind inventing that camera to work together to make the weave of your shirt can also be used. That concept of taking multiple ideas and putting them together to make a good, strong idea is what I believe in. I believe that multiple people all throughout history and even living now have had great ideas that everyone should know and everyone should use to help judge what is moral, what is right, what they should do, and what they should pursue with their lives. And I don't believe I'm the ultimate source of truth. I believe I'm pretty ignorant. I believe I really don't know that much. I'm in college, not because I want a degree or because I want a good job. It's because I want truth.
Good.
And what is truth? I want to
bravo.
know what is truth.
All right.
But I want to know from people who have spent their entire lives like me looking for something deeper.
Good. Bravo. Then how on earth can you conclude that putting your faith ultimately in yourself is a wise move?
Because I see no evidence to do it in any single other person or deity.
You don't see no doubt.
Well, sir, just think about this rational mind that you have.
Well,
If your worldview is correct, your rational mind comes from the non-rational. You really can
Elaborate.
believe that?
Elaborate.
basically,
If there is no God, your rational mind comes from the non-rational, from matter, energy, chance.
And it's a freaking miracle.
Good.
Not
Then with you, if you understand that it's a miracle, does not a miracle demand a miracle worker?
No.
Fine, then how do you get a miracle?
Think of this way. Okay, let's say today I walk out into traffic, I get hit by a car, I'm dead. Okay, that really sucked. Another guy walks out into traffic, he doesn't get hit by a car.
Yeah?
And he sits there and he goes, holy shit, I was almost hit by a car. Well, how many people that day either got hit by a car or didn't even come close to getting hit by a car, and then he was the one person who almost got hit and he goes, it's a miracle I was saved. No, odds dictate if there's so many millions of people crossing the street every day, some of them are going to get hit by cars, some of them are going to hit and miraculously survive for any number of infinitely detailed reasons. And there's going to be one guy who just goes around going, no, you know, God saved me, it was a miracle. And that can be shown on multiple levels. There's so many of us on this earth, of course things that would look miraculous would occur. It's odds. Someone's got to win the lottery. Is that a miracle? No, that's just the odds. It does not necessitate a miracle. That necessitates you having been that person who happened to be in the right place at the right time doing the right thing for whatever reason. Because there's a whole bunch of other people who got screwed and you just happen to be one of the lucky ones.
Yep. Well, I am in awe of your gullibility and your blind faith. Because I can promise you, if I'm playing poker with somebody and he's dealing, and if he deals 5 perfect hands to himself, and he tells me that's just the luck of the draw, I'm going to be really incredulous. That is nothing, sir, compared to the complexity of your eye and my eye, your body and my body. And if you can just believe in the luck of the draw that way and say, well, out of all the millions of opportunities that could have happened, we've arrived here on planet Earth as human beings, living in a universe that is supporting us.
Evolution with luck. Evolution was self-driven by the organisms that evolved. It was not just luck.
If there is no God, sir, luck is a big part of it. Lucky us. My point is, that's ridiculous thinking. That's irrational. Because I have to work so hard to get a ball to go through a metal hoop 10 feet off the ground. And I know it doesn't usually go in just because of luck. I have to work real hard at it. And I think you have to work real hard to get an A on your exam here. And I think it's luck that you get the right answer. My life doesn't, everything in my experience contradicts that idea. I get order and design, I get an education, I succeed at sports, because I have worked hard to bring order out of chaos. And this idea that we just got lucky, that's incredible. I mean, I could never have that kind of blind faith. Never. Because you're going to get ripped off in life. If you have that kind of gullibility in life, man, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it's incredible. You'll believe anything.
What's incredible is how easily you jump from topic to topic, changing it from, direct individual, to over an entire concept or theory, to over the entire world, completely negating the fact that this isn't a closed system, that this is part of a solar system, which is part of a galaxy, which is part of a universe, and within all those planets, there's billions of planets that never had the luck to exist. And you're saying that just because we happen to have that luck, you're saying that, it must have happened for a reason. No, think of how many planets that'll never see life for any number of reasons that we just couldn't even fathom. I don't see that as
what's
luck
really
at
sad
all.
about
I see that as just, once again, it happened because it had to happen somewhere, essentially.
What's really sad about you is, I respect your desire to think, but your intellectual hypocrisy is off the charts. Sir, it's not me who lives in a closed universe, it's you who lived in a closed universe. You're not open to God, a creator of a universe. You have closed the universe down to matter and energy.
What does being open to God mean?
It means that you realize there's a lot more to reality than just matter and energy.
Okay.
You have shut that option out, and you've said no. All the universe is matter and energy.
There's not a possibility of a God. I just said your God ain't real.
So you believe that there's a God?
No, I said there's a possibility. And what is God? Is it an alien force? Is it a far-evolved species? Is it pan-dimensional beings? There's a possibility of God-like beings, but you got to define God for me first, man.
No. If you tell me that you believe in some type of God, you got to tell me the God you believe in. I'll tell you the God I believe in.
I don't have any evidence for a God, and I wouldn't tout it for nothing.
Okay, so don't give me this bit that you believe in God. You don't. Let's be honest.
No, I'm saying there's a possibility for God.
Yeah, right. And there's a possibility that you're going to win the lottery tonight, and there's a possibility that you and I are Martians, okay? Come on, man. Be real. Do you believe that God exists or not?
No.
Okay, thank you. No. So don't flip into, I think there's a possibility. No, you've closed the universe. Okay. You've shut the universe down to just include matter and energy. That's all there is. Let's be honest. Come on. You're the one with a closed universe, not me. So, why do I believe that you've made a mistake in closing the universe down and not including God? Because 100 times out of 100, life comes from life, in my observation. Life never comes from non-life. But because you've kicked God out of the equation, you believe that life comes from non-life. I can't believe that. Plant life comes from plant life. Animal life comes from animal life. Human life comes from human life. I have never observed life come from non-life. But you've kicked God out of the equation, an eternal living being, so you've got a real problem here. You've got life coming from non-life. That's irrational. Secondly, you've got right and wrong, good and evil. That you act as if they're real values, but then you admit that you're the arbiter. You're the one who defines what's right and wrong. There's no God out there who defines right and wrong. It's all relative. You can't have it both ways, sir. If there is no God, justice does not exist as an objective moral. It's simply something you create in your head, I created in my head. It's all relative. And yet you insist upon saying, oh, no. Being kind is really important. According to you, Hitler had his own way of doing it. Jeffrey Dahmer had his own way. You're not right, they're not wrong if there is no God. Ethics are just created in the human mind, so it's all relative. You see, you're not being consistent. You're not living out what you believe. You say there is no God, but then you act as if reason is really valuable, as if life is really significant, as if right and wrong are real. Come on, study Nietzsche, Camus, Sartre. They pointed out, no God, life is meaningless. No God, morality is relative. Doesn't matter whether you shoot your mother or feed her dinner. Choose. And your choice is legit. That's your worldview, sir. See what a closed system you've got? Be open. Be open to, wow, morality, there might not be many absolutes, but there are a few. Slaughtering innocent children is never right. That means there's got to be some real value of justice. Well, gosh, how can there be a real objective value of justice? Only one way, is if there is some type of creator, moral lawgiver, who creates that value. But you've closed the universe, sir, to the point where values don't exist except in our minds. Because your universe is matter and energy, no God. You do it to yourself, and then you tell me that the reason you can't follow Jesus is because of lack of evidence. That's intellectual hypocrisy in light of the way you're trying to live your life. Does that make any sense?
See, my main issue is most of your arguments seem to flip from place to place, and you can't seem to stay within one vein of argument. And honestly, I'm not prepared to argue what caused the universe, what caused life, what is right and wrong on a high philosophical scale. Because honestly, there gets to be a point where you look at things, and especially within philosophy, and you go, okay, well, these people have really good ideas and these people have really good ideas, and most people just end up choosing what works for them. And that is true. And I'm not saying I am ultimately morally correct. I'm not saying I ultimately know what's going on. What I am saying is that I've seen insufficient evidence to follow a God.
The historical evidence is Jesus lived a sinless life, he taught amazing ethical teachings, he died forgiving his enemies, and he rose from the dead. I promise you, sir, if you die and rise from the dead, I will listen very carefully to everything you have to say. Because it's evidence you're reliable, you're trustworthy.